We started out by talking about the fact that this month of May is Mental Health Awareness Month, National Mental Health Awareness Month. So this is not about me bringing you awareness. This is a nationwide initiative, and I am simply sharing some nuggets of what I've experienced or what I know to be true for one reason or another. So here we are. I am not going to be talking about the DSM-4, so don't worry about that. But I'm going to be giving you little tidbits of information of things that have transformed my life over the last many decades. So, with that being said, I want to start by encouraging you to be obedient with the things that you're being called to. I was thinking about posting yesterday because last week I posted on a Thursday, and I thought about trying to be consistent and posting something like thought-provoking Thursdays or something along those lines. And I've used those words before on Regroup for Change. I'm not there yet where I don't want to necessarily make a specific day, because anytime I come on live, it is organic. I promise you. You see, I don't have any notes. I am just giving you what's in my heart. And so I want to give it to you as it's given to me. And so as I was struggling with coming on yesterday, I was about to come on. I was preparing myself to come on. And then I thought, the message just isn't quite ready. But because it was Thursday and I was moderating last week, I was going to come on. I didn't. So I want to encourage you to be obedient to the voice, the still small voice that you hear. Be obedient to that voice. Let me tell you what happened. I didn't come on yesterday because it wasn't right. And what I decided to do is wait. And I told my daughter, I said, maybe I'll go on tomorrow since I didn't have to work today and I could really just come on in the morning and sow into your lives. Who knows that my plan is not his plan. His plan is not my plan. His ways are higher than ours. His thoughts are higher than ours, says the Lord. That is scripture. So I wake up this morning and all that I see is, or hear, ride your bike to the park, run a lap around the park, and ride your bike home. And I thought, that's pretty sweet. I can do that by myself, but if I ride, the bike is going to be stuck. So after I did some studying, some other things, I I actually just asked one of the twins to come. She was more than willing to come. And then my husband volunteered the other twin to come with us. So took us a little bit of time. We got ourselves together, got out. We ride to the park. Did not realize the park was as far as it was. No problem. I get to the park, and let me tell you, as soon as I started to run that one lap around the course, it just started being revealed. Today's message just started being revealed. And so here it is. I did the podcast last weekend, and it posted or launched on Tuesday. And if you haven't checked it out, go on and check it out. It's on Spotify, and the name of the blog is On the Beam. So what we talked about this week is shame and guilt, and getting rid of shame and guilt. And so if you're wondering what the difference is, typically your guilt is you being regretful about something that you've done, that you have done something that you knew was outside of the will of God. You knew that something you did was sinful. It was an act that was maybe voluntary, maybe even involuntary, but you did it later, felt like I shouldn't have done that. And so we carry the guilt of, what did I do? And then on the flip side of that, we have shame, which is typically, it can be something that we've done that we don't want to share with anybody because we're embarrassed by it. But a lot of times, shame comes based on us carrying the weight of what somebody has done to us, right? So when you think about those two dynamics, what we talk about in the blog, what I talk about in the blog is the fact that there's a cleansing. So in 1 John 1, it talks about how when we confess our sins, that he being God, is faithful and just, and he will cleanse us of all sin. And so we just have to humbly go before God, and we have to just let him know that we have committed a sin and that we want to be forgiven, and he is faithful and just to do that. And there's a cleansing that will come. I don't want to get too much into it because I go into it in the blog, and I want to encourage you to go listen to that. But with that cleansing, guess what we use to cleanse? Typically we use water. And so that is going to tie greatly into what happened this morning as I was running around the park. So hold on to that. The thing that triggered this thought in me to even come and talk about shame and guilt was I was watching Little Fires Everywhere. And there was a scene in the episode where there was a young girl who went to get an abortion. And I use a word in the blog and in the podcast, and I say that I was captivated. And I wanted to clarify that a little bit. No, I wasn't excited that this young girl, this teenage girl, this high school student was going to get an abortion. Opinions about abortion aside, what captivated me about that was the fact that she put on a baseball cap, she put on sweats, she was covering up who she was. She didn't want anybody to recognize her. She didn't want people to know that she was the one going in to complete this procedure. Not only did she wear this baseball cap to cover up, but she also we find out that she uses somebody else's name. So I was captivated because one of the things that draws me to Life on the Beam, one of the things that I want to bring to women is this empowerment to uncover, discover, and recover. And I was looking at something, Facebook is so wonderful because I was looking at something earlier this week where 2 years ago this week I posted for an opt-in group for women to uncover, discover, and recover. And the goal was for women to come in and to uncover the shame, uncover the guilt, uncover what you're masking up. What is it that we're hiding? And that's what that episode immediately reminded me of. That there is something that we're covering up. We've got a baseball cap on because there's something that we don't want people to see. There is something when we wear our baggy clothes and our sweatshirts, we're covering up something. We don't want people to see something up within us, something about us. So we need to uncover, and then we need to discover what's underneath, discover who we are, discover who we're called to be, discover our passions and our purpose, and then recover. So all of the time that we've lost, everything that we could have gotten that we didn't get because we were carrying shame and guilt, because some things were taking over our mind. Again, Mental Health Awareness Month, we have to be aware of the battlefield in our mind. There were some things taking us out and trying to control us, and they stopped us from meeting our purpose, from meeting our destiny. So now it's time to recover all of that. So with all of that being said, I was captivated when I saw that scene because it is exactly the thing that stirs me up on the inside, because I don't want us as women covering up so much that we lose who we are, that we are blocked from our purpose, and more importantly, that we disconnect from others and that we fail to allow other people to meet their purpose because we're so bound up and we're so covered up that whatever our purpose was in the pain that we carry, we're not fleshing that out because we're carrying the shame and guilt of it. We don't want people to prejudge us. We don't want people to count us out because of what it is that we've done in our past, the weight of what we're carrying. We don't want people to look at us any differently, and so we don't reveal it. We cover it up. So as I was running this morning, there were so many different things that crossed my mind. Immediately I started running. Anybody who knows me knows that I'm not an interval girl. I'm not the type of person that wants to run a little bit and walk a little bit. I'm the type of person that if I'm going to run, I'm going to run. And I'm going to run from the time I start until the time I finish. If I'm doing intervals, that's because something is going on. Well, this morning, something went on. I started running, and this was after a 4.5 mile bike ride. And before I got too far, I needed to stop. And I needed to start walking. And I was okay with it. But understand this is sometimes the journey is not going to be what we want it to be, what we set out to be. It's not going to be easy. Was I wanting to run the entire 1.7 miles? Absolutely. Was I able to do it? No. But guess what? It's okay. Did I finish the 1.7 miles? I sure did. And I did it in my time and in my way. And so as we're talking about the uncovering process, as we're releasing ourselves from the shame and the guilt that we carry from things that we've done in the past and things that have happened to us in our past, it's important to understand that there's not going to be one cookie cutter way to get it done. Your journey is your journey. And when I say that, even though you may want to start off running and you may want to take off on a sprint and you may be excited about releasing your story, about releasing the pain, about unloading, you may find times where you're veering back, where you're trying to figure out, okay, I've let so much out, but now I have to slow down and now I have to start walking. You may even have to start crying because it's going to be painful. When you begin to unmask, when you begin to release, there's going to be some pain that comes from that. And so you may not be able to run the whole way. And so understand that it's okay to start and stop. It's okay to pull the reins back a little bit and to slow down a little bit. The goal is to finish the loop. The goal is to finish the course. The goal is to finish the process. And so whatever that process looks like, whether it's something that you're used to or not, let's get comfortable getting uncomfortable. Because when we get uncomfortable is where we truly meet our growth, where we truly meet our purpose, where we truly meet our destiny. So that was one thing. The one thing is to understand that you may not get to the end. You may not get to that point of freedom as quickly as you want to get there, but stay in the race. The second thing is, remember I said that at one point I had to stop. Well, do you know why I had to stop? Because I was dehydrated. Dehydration comes in the body when you don't have enough fluids on the inside to sustain you. Do you know what came to my mind as I thought about that? Immediately what came to my mind was Jesus at the well talking to the Samaritan women. We can find that story in the book of John, one of the Gospels. It's not one of the first 4 books. It is the 4th book of the Gospel. But it is the 4th book of the New Testament, which is also the 4th book of the Gospels. Anyway, sorry. What I was seeing when I thought about the woman with the Samaritan woman at the well was Jesus approached her. And he asked her for water. She said that she couldn't provide it. She said that she didn't have anything to scoop it up with. And then they have this exchange. So he's talking to somebody who is ridden with shame and guilt. You notice I said that he was at the well with a Samaritan woman. There wasn't anybody else at the well because she had so much going on within her that she could only approach the well by herself. So she couldn't be there when the other woman was there. She had to go by herself. There was a lot of shame. There was a lot of guilt. There were some things that she needed to cover up that other people couldn't be exposed to in that season. But Jesus wasn't afraid. And so when we talk about unleashing or releasing the shame and guilt, we're talking about releasing it first and foremost to Jesus. I've already told you about what 1 John says, is that when we confess our sins to God, that he is faithful and just to cleanse us. And that cleansing process, we've already identified, we're cleansed with water. And so when you think about that, when you think about the fact that Jesus is at the well with the Samaritan woman and he says, give me water, he then begins to tell her that the water that he wants to give her is water where she will not thirst anymore. It's water that will not be depleted from her body. It is water that will allow her to know who she is forever and evermore. After that, he begins to reveal to her who he is. So when we question whether or not he really exists, he begins to reveal all of the things that she was covering up, all of the shame and guilt, all of the men that she had been with, the man that she was with that she wasn't married to. So he begins to tell her, I know what you carry. I know the weight that you carry. I know the shame and guilt that you carry. But my daughter, he says, my grace is sufficient for thee, and that I still want to give you, in spite of, I still want to give you a water that will allow you to thirst no more. I still want you to be connected with me. I still want you to see value in who you are. And that's exactly what he's saying to you. And so while I was dehydrated in my race this morning, he still told me, do not quit, do not give up the race, because daughter, I am the true and living water. I am the water that will make you thirst no more. I will give you more than you can even think and imagine. I will cleanse you from all sins. I will cleanse you from all unrighteousness. I will make you whole again, is what he's calling us into. And so when we're thinking about what that even looks like, we still sometimes have this fear that grips us because we still we understand what Jesus says, and we understand that he's the cleanser, and we understand that his grace is sufficient. But do we understand how to persevere in the midst of the people around us? Well, that was the other thing that I got from that we're talking about water, and we're talking about this cleansing, but with that water, he says that he'll give us a water so that we don't thirst anymore. But he also commands that we be connected to others. And so sometimes in our dehydration seasons, we may not be as connected to him as we need to be, but perhaps we're not connected to the people he sent to us in order for us to push and fulfill our purpose. Remember, last week we talked about this being a building season. And one of the things, or two of the things that we talked about, is identifying your surroundings and making sure that you know who he's called you to in this season that can help you to push out and birth what it is that he's calling you into. And we also talked about not delaying the process, that you are, what I said was don't delay in taking action. And so we have to move quickly. And so when we do that, again, I moved quickly this morning. And when we do that, sometimes we may stumble, but we have to endure until the end. That's another piece I didn't talk about last week. But what I'm encouraging you with is to stay in the race. While you're identifying your surroundings, stay in the race. As I was running this morning, there was a young man who ran past me. And sometimes I think this happens in our race to uncover, to unmask, is that we see people fulfilling their destiny. We see women fulfilling their purpose, and we get caught up in what it is that they're doing. We get caught up in what we see, and we sometimes begin to compare ourselves with what we see other people doing. Hey, Katara. And then we wonder, can I meet them where they are? Can I meet my purpose in the same way that these people are meeting their purpose? And sometimes we rail back and we stop. Well, when this young man went past me is when I needed to stop. And so I stopped and I started walking. But then when I looked up, I saw that this young man was also walking. And that made me excited, because sometimes when we're running our race and we slow down because we're focused on who's ahead of us, and we were ashamed to move forward because we were focused on somebody else running and we wanted to keep running to keep up with somebody else. Hey, Elle. Then when we stop, that slows us down. But he was walking too. Hey, Pastor T. When he was walking, that gave me encouragement to remember that this race is not for me to follow somebody else. This is my race. Whatever we're doing, when we're unmasking and uncovering and we're walking out our purpose and our goals, we have to follow our plan and our purpose. And so if that means you run the whole way, great. If that means you walk the whole way, fantastic. Take the journey the way you need to take it, but let's stop comparing ourselves to other people, because their race is not our race. And when I saw him walking, that was my reminder that I cannot focus on what somebody else is doing to meet their purpose, because their purpose is their purpose, as my purpose is my purpose. And so I will continue to run my race the way I need to. So as we're releasing the shame and releasing the guilt, how I do that may not be the same as the way you do it, but it's a necessary. And so it has to be done, and we have to do it our way. The other thing that he showed me this morning, I was going through the lake and I started to do my intervals, and I had to walk and run a little bit. I was still dehydrated, but I was determined to push. I was determined to finish. I was determined to make that 1.7 mile loop. But I remembered that when I started, I was making a complete circle. And then I realized that I had to go through some woods to get back to my starting point. And so as I was making this loop around, my mind, I had an end in mind, and my mind was getting to the end because I wanted to be done. But it was also a reminder that I was going to go through something, that as I was completing my journey, releasing the shame and this guilt, it wasn't necessarily going to be an easy process. I was going to come into some darker places. I was at a park, and so what happens is there are sections where there are trees, and you can't always see what's in between the trees. And it's covered, so it's darker than when you're out in the light. And so in those dark places, there were some bugs crawling in the ground. There were some things going on around me, and I didn't know what to expect. There were even other people crossing my path in this dark place. But I had to keep pushing, because at the end of the day, I had a goal to get to. And so even though it was uncomfortable, I knew that I had to come out of the darkness. I knew that releasing the shame and guilt was going to unclutter my mind and ultimately get me to the end. And so I had to do what I had to do to get to the end. And I knew that I was going through this journey. And so I knew that at the end was going to be freedom. I knew that once I unmasked and uncovered what was beneath, I knew that I would be able to ultimately reach my purpose and ultimately reach my destiny. When I tell you it was not easy, because again, I was dehydrated. I made it to the end and I knew I still had to get back home, but I knew that I had to endure. I knew that I could not give up and give in. And so as I was thinking through all of these things just reminded me again of the podcast, again, the woman at the well. And we have to stay in our race and we have to seek him first and understand that our sins have been forgiven. And so the shame and the guilt that we carry, it's time to release it. It's time to release it because he's already told us that when we confess our sins, that he is faithful and that he is just. And as I said in the podcast, we're not talking about he is in our booth and we're not talking about he is in our brothers and sisters. God is faithful and God is righteous and God is just. And so he's going to bring us out of anything that's keeping us bound up. Remember the woman at the well, the Samaritan woman, when nobody wanted to be around her, when she was carrying her own shame and guilt. Jesus said, my daughter, I got you. I want to give you this living water where you will thirst no more. And he gave her that. In the same way I needed some provisions this morning, he gave me exactly what I needed to get to the end of the race and to make it home. And that's what he wanted to offer you. So I have promised that I will come on and do a live, and I have done it. And so I'm going to go because I'm full and that is exciting. And there we have it. So this week on the Beam podcast, we talked about the cleansing process of the shame and the guilt coming from 1 John chapter 1, verse 9. And then today, as I was at the lake, at the park, what was imparted to me was to share the woman at the well and to be reminded that Jesus will give us the water that thirsts no more, that he will give us all the provision we need to meet our purpose, but we still have to release ourselves from the shame and guilt. We cannot carry that and still walk into our purpose. So hopefully this helped you. It has helped me. It's been exciting just to share some of this. This is another thing that I think keeps us bound up in our minds as we are considering Mental Health Awareness Month, and we're considering what it is that's gotten our minds locked up and gotten us I guess at a standstill of achieving our goals. There are some things that are in here. So maybe it's not depression, maybe it's not anxiety, but there's something that's keeping us bound up. And it is time to go through the process, to go through the woods and allow ourselves to be released from it. God has already released you. What are you waiting for? Hope you got something. Drop us a note. There I go again. Drop me a note below. Let me know. DM me. You don't have to walk the journey alone. I am here for you. Love you. Peace.